Hey everyone, D-Dub Squizzy here. Welcome back to Civ 3 World War II. This is my last one. I think this is my last non-109G. I actually want to double check right now. Folk Wolves. I'm almost at 400 of those suckers. 88s, not Folk Wolves. Yep, looks like it. I have phased them all out. Awesome. Where's this at? My goodness, we're just getting so far away. Once again, I never thought I'd have this problem of my planes are getting produced like 88s. Well, I guess that's not true. I always knew I was going to have this problem. I didn't think it would happen until I actually reached America, but we are definitely too far away now. How many do I have here? Okay, one of these is going down there as well. We might be able to take those this turn. Not that these two are going to matter a whole bunch. We'll move a couple more into Saigon. That area could get put under fire. Dang it, right. They have still more of those. Okay, just the one? Looks like it. See if we can't at least blow up the Spitfire. Cool. Okay, 1939. For a second I thought it said something different. Man, they're really good. 1114? They're only marginally worse than ours, and if they get their 1941, guys, they are going to be much better than ours. Okay, these ones stay here. Here, let's go ahead and bombard first. Because I assumed they'd build a couple of new guys over here. Well, maybe not. Not done yet. Come on, don't you dare lose to this guy. Okay. Yes! Okay. This already has a barracks. Awesome. Get me a temple in there. Sure, get away from the dangerous people. Okay. So now then. Other Messerschmitts. Let's get these ones inside. Oh, there was only one. Excellent. And we're on top of Kuala Lumpur. Let's make sure we absolutely maul this city. Yeah, I can't hit Singapore with any 87Bs. Until I can put them in Palembang. We were doing so good there for a while. Oh, no fighters in the air. We did bomb them a bit. I'm gonna move the rest of these over. Whoops. Yeah, that's a lot of them. As long as the city doesn't get suddenly taken, we should be fine. Which I need to take steps to prevent that, too. Okay, I think they're in good enough shape. We can get them. If motorized infantry can move on to jungles without roads, I think we should be fine, but I don't know if they can. Let's just try to bring down whenever fighters are in Singapore, at least. Good animations on those light tanks. They don't get a lot of love, but the animations are very smooth. We gotten through all the fighters? Down to just Matildas. Oh! If there's a transport here. I think there is. Figures. Yep, there's 3 destroyers by the look of it. Yep, there's our transport. Okay. So, yeah, it's a good thing. I didn't plan to send out my fleet anyway, but... like, I'll send some of them back to meet up with the transports and destroyers that are going to be swinging around. But some of them are going to remain here to block the bay, just to protect Palembang. taking this last little bit of Asia is proving to be very frustrating. Just reaching Kuala Lumpur took a lot more effort than I expected it to. But now that the Japanese have taken out that road, like, why would they do that? Oh, an airport. That would have been helpful. Alright. I think I'm going to put the rest of them into Palembang for now, then. These guys, too. Yeah, I used one of them there. So the rest should be fine. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to have the Drippets covering this spot here. Going to have you there. You right there. Everyone else, which isn't many. How many moves do we have? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go right there. And just so I don't forget later. Like everyone. It's all the ships. Wake you. You were in the air. Move you in too. 1, 2, 3. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or not. I thought that'd be 5. Oh, they moved here. Right, I'm dumb. Okay, so they can meet up next turn. Maybe grab some guys from Kuala Lumpur and bring them around. Okay, let's wear down Kamina again, because the game was... Yeah, that was 100% ridiculous, and I think, I'm going to say unfair, to just have planes, too, that stop your movement. Really slowing us down. But we're basically guaranteed to get the city now. In fact, we might be able to knock Portugal down to a single city this turn. Is that their garrison? No, that is just... Oh, right, no. This was a Belgian city. They don't have any stationary units. Okay, good enough. There might be something to hit out there. Nope. Let's go ahead and take this city now. Oh, wounded German infantry. So we can't take Wombo this turn, can we? I think I used all the ones that were there. No, definitely not. It's got quite a few people. We dealt with this resistor. Cool. That's right, we hit Maputo last turn, but we couldn't take the whole thing. I forgot about that. Too many guys, too rough terrain. Of course, well, let's see what happens. Can we take it this turn? Because I need to know if we can actually get at these British cities. Oh. Okay. I guess we're auto-moving right now. Kind of annoying, but whatever. We have a lot of pollution to deal with. I'm starting to think I have too many troops. I should just start disbanding people at random. Maybe I should send them up into Iceland. Do what America does. Or not Iceland, Greenland. Sometimes they send people into the Canadian wilderness, too. Don't know what that's about either. There we go. Okay, so no, we cannot get them this turn. Yeah, we should be safe there. Alright. Well, now I know. These 87Bs, though, they can hit from down there, so I'm going to move them. So I can completely focus on the Portuguese without a problem. For just this moment. Man, what do you think this would look like in reality? Africa's seen a lot of warfare, but it hasn't seen, especially this portion of Africa, the sort of industrial, you know, tanks and enormous numbers of planes kind of warfare. Well, maybe it's seen some of that, but, you know, Africa is a very warlike place, always has been. I know people like to view Africa as this mostly kind of untouched, pristine place, but that has never really been the case. It's almost always been exceptionally violent, no matter who was in control, mostly because it is a very rich location. There are definitely more peaceful sections of it, but, you know, warlords and empires constantly, kind of like most of the world if you really think about it. Asia's had a lot of conflict over the years, tons of bloodshed, but because its nations are usually so enormous, people tend to overlook a lot of their wars. Europe has, I don't think, that much more contested ground. Like, it doesn't have... Maybe it does. I don't know. I get the feeling it doesn't have much more war than most other locations. It's just that it's so much smaller than most other continents, and there's so many more nations in such a tight area, that it's easy to think they have more conflicts, simply because they're closer. Also because they usually kept better records than other locations on the planet. So, you know, we can look back and see all the wars, whereas we kind of have to do a lot of guesswork in the other locations. People are just warlike. It's how they've always been. That's never going to change. Which is a shame, because you see the beauty of places like Africa. And they are beautiful. I think I've said it multiple times, but especially that... Is it the Serengeti? I think that's what it's called. Just those savannas, Mount Kilimanjaro in the background. Like, it is a gorgeous area. They have tons of natural resources. Huge, wide open spaces. A lot of inconvenient stuff to deal with, that's true. Lots of jungle, lots of wild animals, tons of mosquitoes, but... Man, just the things that you could turn that sort of place into. Quite incredible. Unfortunately, like most of the world, it's been dominated by nothing but warfare. See, it's a little different than, like, say, South America. I don't really know, if I'm being honest, a ton of stuff about South America as far as its natural abilities, right? So... I know that Africa has been fought over so much throughout the history of the world. Mostly because of all the stuff that Africa's got. Gold and iron and oil and natural gases and coal and all kinds... I might have said coal. All kinds of stuff. I don't know if there's really that much in South America. Obviously they have resources. It's a whole continent. But I don't know if there's a dramatic deposits of a lot of stuff. I know that it's very difficult to live in because most of it is an enormous jungle, and it's really historically, or not historically, a famously inhospitable jungle at that. Man, more British infantry is going to be fun. So it's definitely got a reputation. But it also hasn't seen as much warfare, at least from outside forces, as much of the world has. Like, if you go look at the history of South American countries, you'll see they got plenty of war. Mostly from other South American countries. They don't get along for the most part. You know, who does? I think a lot of Americans, after living in America, get into this habit of thinking that most of the world gets along. And Americans, well, Americans don't really get along. America, though, gets along pretty peacefully for the most part. Despite all of the attacks online and stuff, mostly from Europeans or just people from other countries around the world, of how, you know, divisive and destructive we are, no more than anywhere else in the world. The difference is we're allowed to talk about it, right? So you go to, say, China. China is not a safe place, never has been. Pretty much never. But no one talks about the violence and the dangers of the streets and stuff. They do keep some semblance of order, I'll give them that, because tyrants have to maintain their tyrannies, but it is still a dangerous, unhappy, and most importantly, unfree place. The difference is, here in America, you're allowed to talk about the things that are going wrong in your country, and more importantly, at least for why this happens, you're allowed to actually cause a decent bit of trouble before anyone tries to stop you, because we believe in freedom here. Not as much as we should. not anymore, but there is a strong desire, belief, it's a national feeling of valuing freedom in this country. So people are allowed to speak their minds and cause certain degrees of trouble, because that's what we fought for many, many times throughout our history. You know, we fought entire wars to end those sorts of suppressions. They never stop coming. You have to constantly fight them, like forever. And so people look at the US, and they see it both as more fractious than the rest of the world, but also more peaceful, because we're enormous. We have all the resources of a continent because we are most of a continent. And because of the culture that we've got, it gave us a stronger military and industrial power than almost anywhere else, well, not almost, than anywhere else on the planet. And for a long time there, it wasn't even close. And it's not that the rest of the world just caught up or anything like that. No, it's that we slowed down. Things like the income tax, too much federal regulation, and most importantly, I believe, this insistence on trying to fix the world have caused America to degrade from what it should have been, at least the US. You know, that's not what a country is about. Countries don't exist to fix anything but themselves. I got an 87B here. Nope, just 88s. We'll sink you anyway. And so especially Americans, they get this feeling that, you know, despite all those troubles, America is still a relatively peaceful place. It's got definitely extremely dangerous cities, but, you know, the country's enormous. And you can, if you really don't like the city, you can just get up and leave. And then you'll go somewhere else, and you'll be safe in that somewhere else. I live in Idaho. It's pretty much a safe place. Not that there's no threats anywhere, but, you know, nowhere in the world is perfectly safe. There's always going to be some sort of threats. Oh yeah, that battleship just left, didn't it? Didn't even bombard us again? No, I think it did bombard us again. So people get this idea that America is just how the whole world operates. Well, they got out? Or maybe they're coming in. Maybe they were waiting out here. But most of the world just doesn't operate like that. They are mostly... Whoopsie. Extremely violent, at each other's throats, constant destruction and mayhem the world over, and that's just how it is, and how most people want it. Especially, I look at places like Ireland, you know? I love Ireland. I've got a lot of Irish in me myself. But you're kind of a fool if you're going to try to deny that the Irish people are one of the most violent, fractious, contentious groups on the planet. They're in a very localized area, but it really doesn't matter. It's a lot like the Scots, too. If anyone's ever seen that scene from The Simpsons where Groundskeeper Willie is talking about with the Scotsmen and their interactions with other people, and he says, you know, brothers and sisters are natural enemies, like Irishmen and Scots, or Englishmen and Scots, or Norwegians and Scots, or the French and the Scots, or Germans and Scots, or Scots and other Scots. And it's just true. It's how they interact. It's really just how most of the world interacts. The difference is they acknowledge it. Some areas in the world really do get along with themselves, but almost all of them don't get along with anyone else. This is especially true of China. They have a lot of internal problems, like a ton of them, and they're not allowed to talk about most of them, but the things they are allowed to talk about are their external problems. Usually it's pretty racially motivated, but they, as a culture, more or less detest everyone around them. I don't think that... I don't know, maybe the Japanese are still like that to an extent, but they used to be a lot worse about it, where they thought, you know, you didn't even deserve to live. You weren't even human. Not like them. And that's, of course, nothing new to most of the world. The entire world's been like that pretty much forever. People who want to talk about race troubles in America, our troubles on that regard are very slim, or very small compared to how most places in the world are. We just, again, we're allowed to talk about it. And we have this huge diversity of people. Where you have diversity, you have more contention. Just because people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different ideals, different religions, they'll conflict with each other. It's what happens. The only ones that don't do that are the ones whose cultures were originally rooted in an idea of non-confliction. And when they don't do it, the other side, the one they're not conflicting with, whose culture is about conflict, will conflict with them, even if they're not doing it back. Right? So, myself, for example, I am a independent Baptist. I know, most people hear Baptist and they get horrible, images in their head, even, honestly, even independent Baptist. A lot of terrible ones who take that name because it's not an organization, right? It's a set of beliefs. And because no one moderates what those beliefs mean, it's just, you take them at their definition. Anyone can call themselves that, even if they're not anything like that. So you have your Kenneth Copeland, I don't even know if he called himself that, Kenneth Copeland, Jesse Duplantis, Joel Osteen, the big televangelists. Usually, people will either think of that, or they'll just think of Southern Baptist because of the word Baptist. But I'm none of those. I'm independent. I'm part of a local small church body that takes orders from no one but ourselves. We don't conflict with people. Right, we don't associate with them all freely, but we don't conflict with them, we don't seek out trouble, and we certainly aren't going to get into fights or arguments. It's just your ways of doing things, your beliefs are different from ours, so we can't have friendly fellowship, is the word, I guess. But we can have friendly contact, at least. We've always had that. But we can't organize with these other groups because they're not like us, they're different. But we don't cause conflict. However, and you'll see that throughout the history of these sorts of people, back in Europe, in the Middle Ages, many of them were called Anabaptists in certain areas. You'd have groups like the Waldensians, same belief system, but they went by different names. They never conflicted with anyone, as in, they didn't go out to seek trouble or conflict. All they did was peacefully, calmly preach the Word of God and witness to people. And other religions, who would not tolerate that, would seek conflict with them, and because the Baptists wouldn't conflict back, they'd get killed, right? And usually, those are the two states. So most cultures that exist in the world they conflict with people by their nature, because to survive, they must, right? If they don't conflict, they die. Usually, only one of those two things will happen. Yeah, just head straight out there. And so it leads to this, this somewhat sad, I suppose, situation, where the only cultures that will survive in the world are the ones that are willing to hurt other people for the crime of thinking differently. America was very special, very different than that, even though we did have our own sets of beliefs. And anyone who claims that America was founded on basically libertarian values of there are no beliefs, there's no nothing, it's just everyone do whatever you want and that's all good and fine, was never the case. That is not what America ever was, or what it was ever based around. It was a Christian country. Now, the definition of that is up for some debate, because you had a lot of different groups, right? You had some Catholics, you had a ton of Anglicans, a lot of Methodists, Presbyterians, you had the Quakers, you had Baptists, you had a lot of Lutherans, you had a ton of different groups, and they mostly did keep themselves in their own localized areas. In fact, in early America, every single state had its own state church, except Rhode Island, which was majority Baptist, and when the large Baptist churches were approached to make themselves a state church by the state itself, they said, we don't want a state church, everyone's free to worship as they please. That's clearly what the Bible teaches. Why would we do anything different? So yeah, the idea of there not being state churches, for anyone who's curious, that mostly started with the Baptists. Although the Quakers, too, they were a lot like that. I don't think they did actually call themselves a state church. I'm pretty sure they didn't actually do that. They were also very... I'm not a Quaker. Quakers had a lot of crazy beliefs, but it's hard not to like them when you kind of just look at their history. They mostly just left people alone and kept to themselves, and that's a very likable way to be. But the Baptists, too, were a major proponent of that, and they were the ones in Rhode Island. But there were always these other church groups. The difference was, though, America was founded on no specific Christian denomination, right? It wasn't founded on Anglican beliefs, or on Catholic beliefs, or on Methodist beliefs. It was founded by a bunch of men who didn't really believe the Bible, but they believed and reverenced God. And so while they didn't think that the Bible itself was always perfectly true, nor did they think that any particular religion had it all right, they believed that God existed, and that the basic values that, even if not always followed, are preached by all of the people who claim him throughout all of history. They believed those, or throughout all of, Christian history, they believed those were there for a reason. So, for example, stealing is wrong, right? Anyone who says that stealing is wrong, but it's not because God says so, well, why is it wrong then? Right? Well, it existed, that idea of stealing being wrong has always existed, because men have had a conscience, right? It's not like people didn't know right from wrong until God told them with the Ten Commandments or anything. People always knew. And It wasn't about the Ten Commandments. It was about human conscience. However, people knowing, or people calling out the wrong as a religious tenet, that was mostly a very Christian thing to do, right? And man, I don't know what the right participle for the past, I don't know. It was also a Jewish thing to do. I say Jewish. It was a Hebrew thing to do, right? Because they also had it in their law as part of their religion was, the law of stealing being wrong, murder being wrong, adultery being wrong. Everyone always knew these things were wrong. That never changed, because prior to the establishment of a formal religion as we know it now, like, I'm a creationist, of course. I believe wholeheartedly that God created the world in 6 days and made Adam, and that worship has just sort of persisted, not sort of, has actually persisted throughout all of time. And that prior to Israel's existence, people worshipped God in much more general, non-specific ways. They always had the right and wrong. People who actually cared about God would do the things that were right, because that's what he put in them, naturally. But there wasn't any place of worship, mainly. There was no organized religion. We know there were priests, because if you look at the account of Abraham saving Lot and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah from, and his name was like Mehejabesh or something like that, I can't remember. He was a king, he was called the King of Nations, and he had like a confederation of 9 or so kings, and the Sodom and Gomorrah kings, along with 2 others, rebelled against him, so he took the other 5 and went and whooped them. Abraham intervened because his nephew Lot had been taken with those cities, and he smote the king, he freed the people. After that happened, the nearby king of Salem, Melchizedek, was also the high priest of Jehovah before the establishment of any Jehovah-based religion as we know it. So the worship of God has always existed, even though the way that his people have worshipped has changed, right? But God himself has always existed. Which, for anyone who tries to say that that Christianity or Judaism were the original methods of serving, if anyone does say that, I don't think that's a very commonly held belief, but I feel like I've heard that said. Though that is incorrect. But God has always been worshipped one way or another. So, man, what was my initial point? I've kind of got off topic. Man. That's crazy. Anyway, though, yep, right. So those beliefs, right, of right and wrong, being based in the human conscience that was instilled by the Creator, who they called God, because that's the culture they were in, right? They were European. European was entirely Christian. Other people call their Creator different things. I'm not here to say that there's no right answer. I believe that God is the Creator, because that's what his Bible says. But even though they didn't believe the Bible wholeheartedly, they believed in a Creator. Culturally, that Creator was recognized as God, so that's what they called him. The Founding Fathers, at least. And they absolutely believed that the conscience, the idea of right and wrong, was instilled in all of humanity by their Creator, along with certain unalienable rights. Right? That was part of the entire premise of the country. But it was still a Christian-based country. So this idea that America had no national identity other than pure, unrestricted freedom for everything was never true. The real religious freedom that they spoke about was no churches will suppress other churches. I don't even know if they conceived of the idea of Hindus or Buddhists or Muslims or anything else. Obviously they did conceive of Jews because they've been around for the entirety of that time too, but I don't know if they thought about it in that same way, because most of those religions had nothing to do with Western culture, and not just as in like, Western culture hadn't adopted them. They barely even entered into their minds. Like, if you talked about religions and the different ones, you were really talking about different denominations of Christians, because that's all there was, for the most part. At least, in Europe. So, it's sort of an interesting topic to look at. My point is, though, there are certain ideals that America's always held. But those ideals are pretty universal ones that everyone knows, even if they won't acknowledge or admit. Right? Freedom, hard work and discipline, diligence, don't steal, don't murder, don't commit adultery, marriage means something, the family's important, those sorts of ideas, which are, while I could say Christian values, they're really innate human values that all humans who care about their conscience, who listen to their conscience, will believe and accept as well. Because that's how God made humans. He didn't make humans to be Christians. He made humans to serve him. Christianity is just how he served in this age, but it's not always been how he served. So those ideas transcend the idea of Christianity, in fact. Or I guess there's probably a better way to put that. It's not really such a transcendence, but basically, you know, it's not like throughout all of history everyone was wrong until 0 BC when Christ was born, or 30 BC after he rose from the dead and created the church. That's not what I'm saying at all. Humanity has always known right from wrong, and doing right and then just showing God respect, which was usually involved a sacrifice of something living that also cost you something to do. To sacrifice, basically, was a means of showing respect, mostly as a means of showing observance of the promise that he made to Eve and Adam after their fall, that he would send a Redeemer who would save everyone, and they didn't understand why it was necessary, but the sacrifice is what they're really about, is demonstrating the sacrifice that that Redeemer would go through when he came to this earth and sacrificed himself for everyone. Anyway, again, off topic. Point is, America was founded on those beliefs. And even though there were a lot of different beliefs wrapped up in that, we all shared, for the most part, the basic beliefs of right and wrong, and what that really meant to us. So that allowed us, we just destroyed a fighter in there, that allowed us to get along with each other, fractious though we were. We still shared those central values, and probably most importantly about it, the idea of freedom. Not freedom as in you can do whatever you want. Freedom as in you work for something, you own your own stuff, and people leave you alone. You weren't, beheld to the whims of a king who decided one day, your corn is mine, and then took all your corn. You could sell it, or you could not sell it. The government clearly always had extensive authority, right? Things like the draft. But there were also restrictions placed upon it at its founding. For example, it can't just quarter troops in your home because it wants to. You have a right to not have your home quartered. Things like that. And those basically built this culture of safety over time. It was not that safe to begin with, right? There were wars with the local Indian tribes who absolutely did not have those values and believed in, right by might. If they could take it, they were going to take it. That's basically how it worked. People who always say that the West are the imperialist colonizers attacking other people for no reason. No. The West is as imperialist as the rest of the world. Everyone is that way. Everyone always has been that way. I mean, the Indian tribes that the colonists conflicted with, do you want to know who was there before those Indian tribes? Because it wasn't no one. There were initial founders of pretty much every region in the world, but they were conquered thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and that those same areas and locations and resources had been reconquered thousands of times over the course of the history of the world. The Indian tribes were not here originally. No one was here originally. Some people came over from, Asia, mostly of Mongolian descent. That's where most of the genes come from, and became sort of their own ethnic groups, which, by the way, despised each other as much as every ethnic group has ever despised every other one. Like, for example, you go to Asia, you go ahead and take a poll of how the Japanese see the Chinese and the Koreans and the Taiwanese and the Malaysians and the Vietnamese and everyone else nearby, and take that same poll among all the other groups. And you'll see they all hate each other. They've all always hated each other. They will all always continue to hate each other. Because those are the cultures that they have sort of grown up in. America, at the start, held some of those, it's true. Most of its people held a lot of those same beliefs. Not where they specifically believed you were less human based on what your ethnicity was. No, there was still something in there, probably artillery. But where they did hate you, and some of them might in fact think you're less human because of it. People always look to blacks, but they were far from the only ones. The Asians got the same treatment, but not just people who, non-whites. Right, that's right. We have actually some stuff to look at out here. There were plenty of white people for, probably the best example of it is the Scottish and the Irish, who were mostly hated across the country. because they were looked down on by the rest of Europe. They came over here, them and Jews especially. Jews have been, persecuted everywhere. I would say it's a meme if it weren't so deadly serious. But it's true that basically everywhere Jews go, not basically, everywhere Jews go, that everyone wants to kill them, except for the few people who decide not to. It's how it's always been, and that's how it was in early America too. Frankly, it's kind of how it is now, even though they succeed despite it. But for the most part, people would get along, and despite that persecution, they were still mostly allowed to do what they pleased. It wasn't the case at the very start. There's a story of a militia, I think it was at Jamestown, but I can't remember. But there was a wall where Wall Street is now, it's why it's called that. There was a Jewish man who wanted to walk the wall, like everyone else in the militia did, and he wasn't allowed to because he was Jewish, and then he went and did it anyway. I'm pretty sure he got badly punished for it. But that is sort of the history of the world. People are always contentious. They don't like people who are different from them. Culture plays a major part of it, but sometimes it's a lot more childish than that too. But America worked through most of that stuff, and got to the point where it was no longer a concern. Particularly post-World War II is when I think it really hit its stride, but, well, not I think. It's when it absolutely did. When MLK can make his speeches and change the mind of the entire country to see people as equal, worthy of equal rights and treatment when you don't take their actions into account. So it doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from, they're worthy of that equal treatment until they do something that makes them not worthy of it, right? Judge someone by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That was his whole message. That changed the whole country. If this man changing the course of the entire country through speeches, oh, wow. Oh, I was stupid. I moved all of my now I feel like an idiot. I moved all my 88s prematurely. If that man doing that, changing the course of the whole country, isn't seen as a sign of growth, not really for the country itself, because the country was, it is growth for the country itself, but the country is also young. It didn't have any of this, this experience of really needing that much change. Not like the rest of the world did, where this sort of stuff's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. America was new. These changes came so shockingly fast, if you take them in the scope of the world. It's pretty crazy, actually. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sort of things that we have done, and I don't use progress in the modern, nonsensical, liberal version of, just changing how things are now. Progress as in getting past those childish, stupid beliefs and looking at what matters, people's actions. We have actually made that sort of progress, real progress, over many, many years. And a lot of that progress was bought with blood. American blood, I might add. That's a big deal. It set America apart from the rest. And while it's far from perfect, because the entire world is far from perfect, it is still so much more. Oh, I should have beelined it straight down, huh? Yeah, whatever. It's still so much more than basically the whole rest of the world has ever seen. That despite our troubles, we have peace with the largest, most unmonitored land border in the world. This thing with Canada, this is huge. We fought wars with Canada in the past. Bitter wars, ones where they beat us pretty soundly, I might add. And there's a big, unmoderated, almost, not quite unmoderated, but pretty close to it, land border between the two. That's a huge deal. That's the sort of thing you'd never see throughout history. People are constantly warring with each other over the tiniest thing. Look at India and China now. Did you know? I don't know I think this is getting into reasonably common knowledge. I learned it more recently, though. There's a treaty that China and India have to keep tensions, especially violent tensions, low, where they literally can only resolve border disputes by having their people individually go at it with sticks and stones. This is not an exaggeration. They are, by the treaty, not allowed to use any technology that surpasses that. That's still how they resolve their border disputes. Just bear that in mind the next time you think America has a border dispute problem where we treat people too harshly. At least we're not beating each other to death with sticks and stones like most of the world would be. Or, just shooting each other. We don't do that. Sometimes we should. Sometimes the people who invade earn it. And we still don't do that because it's seen as uncivilized. We want to be more civilized than that. We have this place where despite the contentions between people, and there are contentions between people, just go to any state and you'll find bitter resentment about the other states around. Despite those, we're all still Americans and we all still live in relative peace and freedom. There are certain groups in this country, and others, that would like to see that changed. Not because they have an actual, I would say moral, but there's nothing moral about that sort of idea, but not because of an actual belief that that's what's right or how it should be, but simply because it's a method for them to gain power, and it is. When you have people at each other's throats, and they're doing it usually over stupid reasons, it's far easier to manipulate them, because you just say the thing. If they're childish enough to get angry about this sort of stupid thing, then they'll be childish enough to do whatever you tell them to do. That's the idea, really, and it's how it always works. So the people who want that destruction, they're doing it just so they can make opportunity, and then once they get what they want, right? You look at the Soviet Russians, right? The moment they get what they want, they kill all of the dissenters. Because those guys, they dissented against the last regime, which is normally very corrupt, but they resisted against that, so they'll resist mine too, because mine's going to be very corrupt as well. So they put them down. And that's just sort of the nature of tyrants. It's how they've always been, and always will be. And despite those sorts of people, America has managed to maintain itself for hundreds of years, which I know isn't saying that much in the context of all of history, that we have a lot of very old countries around this planet. I know Egypt is just a pale shadow of what it used to be. Are you guys aware that Cleopatra was, I think, born or ruled, one of the two, maybe both, closer to the invention of the iPhone than she was the founding of Egypt? That's how old that country is. Or China. China's just so ancient. And so, yeah, America's track record, much shorter than the others, because it's a younger nation. And that's just how it is. But it has still managed to produce something very special that the rest of the world has never seen. And it sort of gives, especially the richer, wealthier, more privileged Americans, this sense of an entitlement and pride, not in the fact that their country is the greatest on earth, but in this idea that their petty contentions and squabbles are on the same scale as actual trouble across the world. You hear people comparing, requiring you to call yourself a man or a woman on your driver's license or passport, the equivalent of the Holocaust. You'll hear that being thrown around, which has got to be the most absurd, disrespectful, vile stance ever taken. Where simply stating reality, you're putting on equivalent with mass murder of people for nothing but their ancestry. What is wrong with you? You're broken in the head if you think those are even slightly related, even close, because there is nothing about those that rings even a little bit similar. And it's because of the peace we have here. Europe mostly holds that same idea. Because America has been footing the bill for their defenses for all of this time, they felt very secure, very safe, because America has made them so. And it's turned them into nightmares. Because really, if someone has no struggles, what motivation do they have to be anything except proud? Right? They don't know the difference. They've never seen the difference. Go to Asia, almost anywhere in Asia, and just try to live the way we do here in America, and you'll see just how big a difference it is. Oh, I left a capital ship there. I forgot about that. That's good. Most of the world is violent and brutal and mean and enslaving. That's a big one that almost everyone does. And it's how they've always been and how they will continue to be. No matter, even these slight little areas. You take, say, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore here. I don't know anything about their specific history, but around the world you'll see cases of things like this, where two places this close together will see themselves as on opposite ends of the world, and will see one as the devil and the other, and themselves, as basically godlings. And they will slaughter each other. over that nonsense. Okay, so they cannot pass over jungle. Can motorized? Darn it, no. Okay, so I'm going to need to get my infantry in here. And my workers. I don't have a security division here. I'm just going to leave this guy. That's a lot of dudes. But I don't think any of them need to stay in Bangkok. We do need to get them down here. I might actually just have my transports take care of it. No, for all the hate that America gets, it is something very, very special. It's worth protecting. It saddens me to see that some people don't care about it, but it also reassures me to see that some do. Some people are willing to take major risks and put themselves out there just to maintain it, because some people are doing that. You know, makes you feel like not all is lost. For quite a while, it seemed like we're in this dystopian, post-apocalyptic world, and that's how, you know, you go on to say Reddit, that's what you'll see is everyone pretending that America is now a dystopian nightmare future where there is no hope of freedom or anything else, where the entire world is pretty much imploding at every moment because our government is just so totalitarian. They have no idea what real struggles are. Just the audacity to think that you've got it tough. In America, of all places. To call it stupid is, I think, giving too much credit to that sort of attitude. It's just childish, is what it is. It's just you're being a baby, and you're being a baby in the dumbest, most frustrating and annoying and disrespectful way that you can be. Show some gratitude for this almost perfect country, historically speaking, that we have here. One of safety, of prosperity, of opportunity, even now, even as bad as our authoritarian wannabe dictators are, because we do have some who would really love for this to be an authoritarian regime they can control. Bad as they are, and they are bad, they're working to take away opportunity, to take away freedom in any way they possibly can. Those are terrible things. They're terrible people, and yes, it hurts. I live in this country. It makes it difficult to advance further, to take care of my family the way I should be able to. It doesn't make it impossible, though. In some places, it would be considered impossible. You know, you go to medieval Europe, you might just starve because the Lord decides he's going to take your stuff because he wants it a little bit more than you. He decides you don't really need it. We don't have that here. We don't have anything even close to that here. They have that in other places in the world. You want to know why Africa's in such disarray? It's not because of resources. I just went over that. They have a ton of resources. A lot of great resources. No, they're in that state, for the most part. Because they're ruled by tyrants, and always have been. Almost across the board. And the ones who aren't explicit tyrants are kind of hidden, sneaky tyrants, for the most part. Or they're in the pockets of tyrants. Because that's the cultures that have been in Africa forever. It's the cultures that were everywhere on Earth forever. Originally, if you were a king, it was because you had the power to take control and hold control. You were good at this, right? You were good at combat, or at least at leading men. And so you could do that well enough to where the people would follow you. And now you're a king, and now you use that army of these people who trust and follow you to conquer your neighbor. It is not a good thing. It is the nature of the world, though. But then this idea came around. I say then, it's pretty much as old as history. Where it turns out it's not about you just being a strong warrior. What really matters is your ancestry, because you're actually the child of a god if you're king. Really, that idea came about with the Tower of Babel. For anyone who's not aware of much of that history, the Tower of Babel was built, I say built by Nimrod. It wasn't really built by Nimrod, but it was overseen by Nimrod. It was his pet project. And his whole purpose, if you look in the Bible, when it talks about him, it says that he was a mighty hunter after God. What that means, it doesn't mean he hunted for God. It meant he hunted the same thing God did. They were hunters in the same field. They had the same prey. And of course, the only thing God's ever been interested in, as far as the thing he wants and won't just create or take, is human souls. The worship and adoration of his creation and subjects. That's what matters to him. Well, that's what mattered to Nimrod. To that end, Nimrod had a tower built. The Bible, for those who read it, of course, says that they wanted to build a tower unto heaven. Some people think that means they wanted to build a really big tower. That's not what that means. A tower unto heaven is a tower that reaches heaven, which can only be done through communion or worship. It was supposed to be a temple, like the ziggurat. Maybe not quite a ziggurat, though, but it was a temple. That was the idea. It was the invention of idolatry in its pagan form. Idolatry has always existed because really idolatry is just covetousness. Or, I guess more accurately, it's the other way around. Covetousness is idolatry. If you covet something, you're making it an idol. You're making it the center of your life. You want that thing. And so you're willing to put forth your work and your effort to get it, even though it's worth nothing, is basically the idea. So, covetousness, in God's eyes, is idolatry. So idolatry's existed for as long as sin has, which was, of course, the fall. Or really, I guess you could even put it a little further back. You could say that the devil's idol was himself, which is pretty true. But pagan idolatry, this idea that things in creation, for example, the sun, the moon, and the stars, were beings that had power that were worthy of human worship, that did not exist. Not until Nimrod brought it in. And for those who aren't aware as well, Nimrod had a son. A son who he claimed, because he claimed to be a god, he was the one who demanded worship. He claimed that that son was then, of course, the son of a god. If anyone's curious about the origins of the pharaohs or the shoguns or really any king in basically all of Europe who claimed divine right as their will or as their reason to lead, and by divine right I don't just mean God said I'm supposed to lead. Some of them did say that, but that's not really what divine right usually referred to. It's I am a god or related to one, so I'm destined to lead, which is a bit different. The kings of Israel, they didn't claim divine right. The priests who ordained them claimed divine right. And then their children after them. Although, initially, that was a little iffy. Saul was the first king of Israel. For anyone who's not aware of Israel's history, Saul was their first king, followed by King David. Saul had children. None of them had any position of royal authority after the reign of Saul, and that was because of his actions. His family got cut off because he was a fool. Doesn't mean they were all going to get killed, although most of them did. And it would be normal in most of the world for them all to die. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's no way I can reach even with something that can jump out there. But King David loved Saul's family. He was not going to hurt them, so he didn't hurt them. In fact, he was heartbroken when he found out that Saul was dead. Much to the dismay of his men, who had been fleeing Saul for quite some time. But it was very different at the time in Israel. But they eventually degraded into the same type of lifestyle as the rest of the world, which was, well, my dad was king, so I am too. And then if you look at the northern tribes, after the Civil War, I guess it wasn't, there was a bit of a civil war. It wasn't an enormous war, if I'm being honest. It was mostly a simple rebellion that resulted in a kingdom split. They had a couple fights, and then it was very quickly over. Because the king who instigated that, well, not the one who instigated it, but the one who was responsible for it, Rehoboam, he intended to go try to take the other tribes back when they rebelled. He only had 2 or 3 with him. And God sent a prophet and told him, don't you dare, you will lose. I'm going to make sure you lose. You deserve this. And to his credit, he listened. And he didn't try to take them back anymore. And he stuck with what he had. Why aren't you moving? And so their wars, they sort of ended right then and there, although they fought many other times throughout history, always at the reprimanding of God, because he told them, stop fighting each other, you're brothers, knock it off. They didn't care. But the only line of kings was David's line, and the only reason David got a line is because he had done so well. He had done the things God told him to do. He was far from perfect. I'm not trying to claim that. He made many, I would say mistakes, but terrible decisions that were, frankly horrific and evil. He murdered people. He committed adultery. He sinned against the commands of God repeatedly. Things like numbering the people, which he was not supposed to do. And so he was far from perfect, but he still followed God with his heart. That's what he was about. He didn't see God as nothing. He didn't see God as another deity or superstition. He had respect to his Lord. And so God respected him back and established his line and then brought the Savior through it, who was then, of course, the truest king, the best king that the world could ever see. Although his own people rejected him for that purpose. Because he wasn't the sort of king they wanted. He will be eventually. Once he returns to the world. But at the moment, he's not. They're pretty much in exile from him, which is usually not the way that sort of a thing would go. Alright, I think I've done everything here, so I should move this along to the next one. But that's not how the world's history has been. It's not how it's ever been. This idea in America of there is no one above us, we govern ourselves, we are all worthy of the same life, the same benefits, the same freedoms, the same laws as anyone else. There's no one who is above the law. That never existed, ever, in the rest of history. That is as new can be. That's right, it was just one King George V, so this guy alone might be able to take this whole group. So anyway, all that to say, America is very special. The peace we have in America is very special, and the people in America are mostly taking it for granted. Look around the rest of the world. Europe is brimming for war. There's a war in Eastern Europe right now, and the people in it are gearing up for a bigger one. Not because it's necessary, because they're still acting like children, like most of the world does, and fighting each other for no real reason at all. I think I've said it before, but Ukraine is not fighting for democracy. They're not fighting for freedom. They're fighting for Zelensky. Some of them might be fighting for freedom from Russia. In fairness, Russian rule sucks, but Zelensky's not really any better. He's also a tyrant. He's suppressed free speech. He's suppressed real elections. He has suppressed religions. He is, by every definition, a tyrant. A tyrant who is willing... Whoa, what's going on over there? A tyrant who is willing to imprison or kill his own people for his own political ends. That doesn't make him much better than anyone else, does it? He's just weaker. Gonna bombard us? Nope. Oh! They might be coming to join up with their convoy. Cool, I might be able to get that guy. So that's a tyranny. I know this might be taboo to say, but I don't care. Ukraine's not that much better than Russia. At least their leadership isn't. Russia's just got an older, more established one, so people hate them more. Which I guess is fair. There's a lot of things to hate about Russian leadership, government, and culture. Not everything, though. They're not the worst in the world, but they got their problems. But the rest of Europe is doing what the rest of Europe has always done historically, which is get ready to start killing each other. I don't know if they're up for it this time. They're a lot weaker than they used to be. But, it doesn't look good. I'll say that. But that's just the nature of the world. That is how it has always been. What we've had in America has been so very special, so very different. It's like nothing the world's ever seen before. And it's so enormous, so productive. Whoa. Oh, I think Manila's falling. Well, I don't think there's a thing they can do to stop it. That it is worth protecting. And it's also worth pointing out those differences. It's stupid to try and pretend that America is just another country that isn't that much different from any others. It's not God's country. It's not the promised land. For like the whole world. It's not the world's promised land. Sort of thing doesn't exist. And it's not just an idea. What it is a practical place. Right, that's that tank that's so unexciting. Ooh, I could get Hindenburgs. I could go for Hindenburgs. Escort carrier I don't like that so much. I like Cruiser C2, don't care. The Stug would be cool. But the Hindenburg, I want. I really want to get Panzer Grenadiers and convoys, but I feel like at this point in the game, it's just so late. I want to get Hindenburg. I'm doing it. I don't know. It makes me sad to see the struggles my own country goes through. And as much as I talk about, we're not like other countries have been throughout history, where it's always been about imperialism, there definitely has been imperialism in the U.S., just like there has been everywhere. People only get angry about it now in America because they're allowed to. Go to Russia. Start whining about Russian imperialism. Go to China and start talking about how terrible the Chinese imperialism throughout history has been. Go to almost any country in the world and do that. You'll find the only ones where you're allowed to are the ones America has conquered, assisted very heavily in warfare, or America itself, basically. So, like, the European nations that we thumped and then revived in our image, basically. Japan, not so much Japan, actually. They might let you. I don't think they'll specifically stop you from saying those sorts of things, although their culture nowadays is very odd. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I like it. It's very much them, and it doesn't seem to reflect exactly any other particular group. All of Europe has basically become America Junior at this point. And by that I mean they take what we're doing and they just try to do it more. And they do that because America basically made Europe what it is after World War II. We kind of rolled in and we rebuilt most of it in our image. Britain was still intact, and so is Spain. I don't even know what goes on in Spain. They do their best to stay irrelevant. But you look at Germany, at Austria, what's left of it, and all of the, well, not so much those Eastern European nations. Those ones were conquered by the Soviets. Look at Italy, at France. But not just the ones that we attacked too. You can also go to the Nordic ones. And the point is, though, it's Western civilization where you're allowed to point at their history and say it was bad. Where you're allowed to point at the things that they are, that they have, and demand that they change it. And you won't be shot in the face for it. The very idea, the very fact that that's even possible in those locations is proof that they are much better than those around them. And it's frustrating when people refuse to acknowledge that. When our own people claim that we are still, destructive, horrific. I'm of the mind that America was never the things it's accused of, right? So, let me backtrack on that a little bit. America itself had some very racist tendencies, that's true. We fought a war to get past that, and then we did get past that. That's what happened. I know people don't like to acknowledge that fact as true, but it is true. We did that. We fought a war. We killed millions, I think it was over 1 million, of our own people for the sake of getting that done. And then it was done. We did it. There is nothing left to complain about. The people whining about restitution, about reparations, that you need to pay the money that you have based on skin color to other people based on their skin color, I got a couple things to say to that. First of all, slaves only were sold to the Europeans. Like, the Europeans didn't show up in Africa with nets riding horses and capture Africans, like the Planet of the Apes. What happened was, Europeans came to Africa, and the Africans sold Africans to the Europeans. That's what happened. They were sold as slaves by their fellow Africans. Because, turns out, your skin color doesn't make you a better person. That was the whole point of what we've learned over the course of human history. How you look has nothing to do with how you act. And black people are just as evil as white people, or Asian people, or any other type of person, because we're all just people. So this idea that white people are somehow responsible for more destruction across the world, or more damage, is absurd. They're not. The difference is we have kept a good history of both our benefits and our atrocities. We've kept good histories of both for the most part, because Western culture has done that. While most of the world has erased all of their history, except for the few things they want to keep track of, including their atrocities, so it's harder to track those down. The second part is, we have a culture that produced a lot of stuff, so opportunistic scoundrels who wanted to be tyrants saw a means of exploiting that culture to get their own to get power in it, right? To take control, and the way they do that is by making the culture hate itself so that they're less likely to resist when this person tries to take control, or at least people like them. And they have what, of course, the Soviet Union called useful idiots, who will listen to their nonsense despite its nonsensical, nature. It is nonsense, and they will listen to it anyway. And the reason they'll listen to it is because they're idiots. Because they won't think about it. I don't mean that as in they're naturally dumb. As in they don't want to think about it. They want to feel good. And the way that they feel good is by feeling like they're doing some grand justice in the world. Everyone likes to feel like they're the good guys. It's just how everyone has always been, and it's how they will continue to be. That's never going to change among humanity, and, I don't expect it to. I saw pollution somewhere, and I don't remember where it was. I got to track it down. No, I saw that one. Pretty sure it wasn't over there. Well, I had a lot to say this episode, apparently. I did not go into this episode expecting to have a massive conversation with myself, but I don't know. I have a lot that I think. And I like talking about what I think. I just like talking in general. I get to do it a lot more now than I used to, but it is also hard to find good conversation. Most people get very offended at you the moment you start talking about something that's even marginally controversial. And, oh, there it is. And not really because they disagree with you, but because they don't want there to be conflict, and they're afraid of saying the things that are true, despite their truth, because they're afraid of conflict. Everyone, watch out. I'm going to get into these talky bits, so the speakers are going to go crazy. Now, I understand wanting to avoid conflict. I don't like conflict. I like avoiding it. That is my natural state of mind. But you can't sacrifice truth for peace. That's a terrible, terrible idea, because truth, see, the opposite of truth is lies, right? Deception, just things that aren't true, are obviously the inverse of truth. If those are not true... Oh, I can't kick him. I see. If those things are true, you should have no issue saying them, because they're true. What would possibly be the problem? If you do have a problem saying them, despite their truth, and the reason that you have a problem saying them is because you want to avoid conflict, then I think that makes you, to an extent, in most situations, weak. Now, I'm not saying just because it's true means it's a good thing to say. One of a good example that I see is someone is overweight, right? Someone's heavy. Obviously, they can control that, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. Food is one of the strongest temptations on Earth. It absolutely is, as is laziness, the two things that cause people to be overweight. More than anything else. There's a tiny percentage of, actual biological issues that prevent people from losing weight or cause it. But for the most part, it's you eat a lot, or at least more than you should, and you don't use any energy, or as much as you should. So those things cause you to gain a bunch of weight. It's obviously a problem, right? It's better to be not overweight than to be overweight. And this is not coming from someone who is super thin. I don't think, technically I guess I'm probably overweight, but I'm not obese or anything. But I am overweight. I can stand to lose some weight. And so if someone told me, hey, you could lose some weight and that'd be better for you. Absolutely true, right? I can't deny that. I can't say it isn't true. But it's not a good thing to say if it's unnecessary, right? Why do I need to lose weight? Am I in danger? Or why do you care specifically that I lose weight? If I bring it up and they say that to me, then there's nothing wrong with it. There's technically, I guess there's nothing wrong with it either way. But then it's fair to say, right? If I bring it up, someone points that out, well then obviously I can't get mad at them if I'm going to be reasonable about it. But if I'm not reasonable about it, and I think that they are somehow the worst human being on the planet for pointing out a simple fact that I also already know, then that's a me problem. I have no right to get offended about it. But really the point I'm trying to make is there are times where pointing out something that is true is also not specifically good. Not as in it's morally wrong, but it's a poor choice. It's an unwise decision, and it's likely to cause unnecessary conflict. But pointing out things that are true when someone brings them to attention is a good thing to do. So, for example, a man says that he's a woman, because he wants to be. But he's clearly not a woman, he's a man. Well, it's right to then point out the truth of that matter, because they're asserting a lie, right? If a heavy person, I keep saying heavy, if a fat person says they're thin, well, then you should tell them they're not. If you care at all to be involved. You could just get not involved, and I could see the argument for that. But to reinforce that idea, that lie, because it makes them feel better, is wrong. It's evil. It's bad. It's destructive. Because it's a lie. And lying is never the right decision. Ever. So this idea that you can't say things because they're controversial, even if they are true, it's not... I oppose that idea, but not in the way of, that just means I'm going to say whatever it takes to offend people. Because I don't want to offend people. But if you are attempting to spread lies, specifically for the purpose of controlling people, which is the main reason that the left in America spreads its lies, is for control. Most of the ground foot soldiers, they're useful idiots, like the Soviets would call them. They actually believe this nonsense, for one reason or another. Usually selfish, usually dumb, usually willingly ignorant, but they can say that they believe it. But the people higher up, they obviously don't. They're using it as a tool, because they'll backtrack on it the moment it's useful to them politically, and then backtrack right back to it when it's useful to them politically again. So clearly they don't believe it. They're using it. Those people, I absolutely will offend. I will do it willingly. I will do it happily. Not as in I want to go out and offend you. But I am absolutely willing to do that. It makes me happier when I do that than when I don't do it, because you're out here spreading lies for the purposes of hurting people. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, speaking the truth is never a wrong thing to do, but it might not be wise in certain situations. But speaking the truth when a lie is being purported as a mirror to that, to show people the other side of it, is, I believe, always a good thing. Even if it causes conflict. Because conflict alone is not a good reason to let damage be caused, right? It'll avoid conflict if we let this bad thing happen. I've long thought about the end of World War II, right? The Axis powers fell. We conquered Japan. Us, Britain, and Russia conquered Germany, mostly Russia. The Soviet Union was believed by most people, including the Soviet Union, to go to war with the Allies next. That's what the world assumed was going to happen. Cooler heads prevailed. I've heard it said before, cooler heads prevailed. Maybe not the smarter ones, but cooler ones. Because you look where it brought us, right? It was the Soviet Union that gave us the insanity of the left. Not because the Soviet Union believed the things the modern left in America, or the rest of the world, really. The European, I don't know if they call it the left there, because their original politics, what they'd call left and right, are different than what we'd call left and right. But the American left version in most of the European countries also comes from Soviet Russia. Because when the Soviet Union, when it existed, it grew very big, very powerful, and it had these certain beliefs, these methods, and these ideas of whatever it takes to assume power. Whatever lie we have to tell, whatever method we have to use, we will use if it gets us to our goal of more power. That's all they were about. When their union fell, what everyone should have done was treat those Soviet rulers as war criminals, try them in a court, and execute them for their horrific crimes they committed under their power. Or at the very least, never trusted them even a little bit. But instead, the Berlin Wall fell, and the Scorpions, specifically Hasselhoff, sang the winds of change on their rubble. Now, I can understand the reason we didn't fight the Soviet Union after the end of World War II is because the world was tired of war, and people might not have gone along with it. The reason that we didn't fight, or that the people didn't respond that way when the Soviet Union fell, is because they had been tired of that conflict that had gone on for so long, the Cold War, and they just wanted it to end, and it finally looked like it was. And so they set it aside, and they just wanted everyone to be happy and friends again. But that naivety is not a good reason. You know, they avoided the conflict. That's not a good reason to let the evil continue. And those horrible people brought their ideas across the Western world, where all of the power and production was, because the Soviet Union fell, right? The thing they were using for power was no longer powerful. So they spread out. They found other places of power, and then they wormed their way into those. And now, you have these troubles that we have now, right? This idea of transgenderism, of a man or a woman calling themselves the opposite sex and becoming the opposite sex, is straight up a lie defended by the left for no reason, not because they believe it, for no reason other than power. Because they can use that to manipulate people, to create out of thin air a marginalized society that doesn't actually exist. Make it marginalized because they make these crazy ideas mainstream, right? And force people to oppose it so that then they can claim marginalization and then use that as political power to unseat whoever is currently in charge, usually targeting a whole demographic. So, straight white Christian males in America. There you go. That is the target demographic of destruction. And they intend to turn every other demographic against them. This doesn't work in the long run, mostly because those demographics that they're trying to unite hate each other too. Because humans are like that. They really don't get along. And so mostly they'll fight with each other. But in the process, they'll do a ton of damage, and usually they'll cause the collapse of a lot more than just that one group. And sometimes, some of those tyrants get power. And if they do, every one of those ideas they used to get power immediately goes out the window. You can see that in Soviet Russia, or really anywhere that a revolution under the name of a tyrant has taken place, right? Look at Venezuela, you look at Italy, look at Germany, look at Russia. They didn't actually care about what they said. They threw it out the window the second it was convenient to do so. The second it was in their powerful interests. And so basically, the heart of what I'm trying to get at is you can't accept lies for the sake of avoiding conflict. That's not really what we did at the end of the Cold War. That was just sort of an analogy, but doesn't really line up perfectly with that. But you can't accept lies to avoid conflict. If someone is presenting a lie, it must be opposed. If you care about your society, you care about what's right, you care about truth, and you care about your fellow man, you must oppose the lies, wherever they are. And if you won't do that, you don't actually care about those people. Because if you did, you would try to protect the society they're in. If you're a parent, you then don't care about your children. Or really, even if you're not a parent, you don't care about anyone's children in your society if you're willing to let it go under to avoid conflict because it makes you uncomfortable. It's just like me, as a Baptist, right? I believe that everyone is going to hell if they don't get saved. And get saved doesn't mean attend church, doesn't mean give tithes, it doesn't mean confess your sins to a random priest in a box somewhere. It means acknowledge that you're a sinner and accept Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. That's all that salvation is. I would be a hypocrite, a weak man, if I refused to talk to people about that because it's uncomfortable. And trust me, it is uncomfortable. No one likes to hear that. No one wants to hear that. Most people will never accept that. But I believe that. So how pathetic would I have to be to refuse to talk about it just because people don't like it? If I believe that's true, and I do, then I must act on it. It's why someone like, I cannot remember the guy's name. He was a Catholic priest, missionary, way back in the day. I think in the early 1900s, maybe it was the 1800s. He was going to Japan as a missionary, and they told him, if you come to Japan, we will kill you the same way that your Lord was killed. He went to Japan anyway, and he was crucified by the Japanese for coming there. They warned him, they told him what was going to happen, he did it anyway. He did that because he actually believed it. I'm not a Catholic. Catholics don't understand salvation. They don't know how to get to heaven. Not the right way. But he actually believed that. I can have respect for him for that reason. He was willing to put it all on the line because he believed it was the right thing to do. That's conviction right there. Not conviction as in like biblical conviction. Conviction of spirit. Of genuinely believing the thing that you're hearing and believing its gravity. Believing those people are in enough danger permanently, eternally, that it's worth your life. That Catholic priest, and again, I'm not a Catholic. I don't like the Catholics. I like a lot of Catholic people. I don't like the Catholics as a group. They are just as power hungry as anyone else. At least their leadership is. It always has been. Most Catholics will even acknowledge that. But despite those problems, a lot of Catholic people believe what they believe very heartily. And they're willing to put themselves in very uncomfortable situations, just as every real Christian should, to try and reach other people with the good news that they have, that there is a way to avoid hellfire. Just because that makes people uncomfortable doesn't mean you shouldn't say it. Again, how weak, pathetic, and hypocritical would I have to be to refuse to talk about it because it makes me and other people uncomfortable? It's their eternal souls I'm talking about, and I'm willing to spare myself a little bit of comfort for it. So that's the reason that I'm willing to say everything that I'm willing to say. I believe it. Other people are willing to purport lies, right? So if I'm over here arguing for hours about the truth of gravity and how much it really exists, that's a useless fight to have. No one's arguing that one. There's no point in causing what could be actual dispute and making people actually angry at you because of your attitude or your argumentative nature or anything. To argue a point everyone already agrees with. But when the point is hotly contested and everyone knows its truth, they just refuse to say it because they don't want to make people uncomfortable, well, then it's worth saying, which is, of course, why I say it. But I think I've rambled on long enough. I should end this one here. If you haven't yet, please check the link in the description for my book. If you like the look of it, give it a read. And if you like the read, give it a positive review. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.